Usually before I start, I would tell like some story or try to give some fancy thing, but this time I decided to try a different approach. I would like to, before I start, ask everyone to try to keep an open mind as much as possible, right? This talk can be uncomfortable for some people, which is fine. Like, we are adults, we can talk about uncomfortable topics, and we can think about it. But most important for me is really try to keep an open mind, really try to remove everything that you learned in the past. Let's try to talk to each other. Before I start, who am I? My name is Amr Abdelwahab. I know a super hard name. Probably my closest people can pronounce it, so it's fine. I'm a tech lead at a company called Tourlane in Berlin. We are a company in the travel tech. If you would like to know more, you can ask me later. I'm quite an active member of the Ruby community, which is not a functional programming language, even though some people argue and stuff, but no, it's not. I'm one of the core organizers of Code Curious, or also known as Rails Girls Berlin in the past, the Ruby user group in Berlin. I was the chair organizer of Euroko, the European Ruby conference in 2017. And I give a lot of talks. It's not just my only talk, but this kind of, this slide here, I put in each talk I ever gave, which says community matters the most. So regardless of technical excellence and its importance, which is something I hold really important to me, but we always have to remember that we write code with people and for people at the end. So regardless of anything else, that's the thing that matters the most, community. I was born and raised in Cairo, in Egypt, in North Africa. And in 2013, I moved to your neighbor, Budapest. And then after that, I moved again to Berlin, also another neighbor, in 2017. And usually when I think of a new topic of a talk, I always ask myself, why do I think people need to hear about this talk? And why is it me, the person that need to give this talk, right? And I usually try to start with this. So it's important to lead with the fact that the topic I'm talking about today is not something I'm an expert at. This is not this kind of talk. It's not an informational talk. It's rather a kind of a talk that comes from my heart to your heart. As a software engineer, right, as a fellow developer, consider a colleague is coming here to rant to you. This talk is about a topic that many people in the past has always deemed an irrelevant topic to the software industry or to the academia of software, right? We keep talking about this like, why are we bringing this here? I just would like to hear about technology and that's it. The fact is this topic impacts the daily life of myself and thousands, if not even hundreds of thousands of your colleagues on a daily basis. And it's very important that we speak about it because it impacts our software, as I will try to show you in this presentation as well. The second thing that made me think a lot about this talk is Dunning-Kruger effect. This is cognitive bias for those of you who don't know it. It's this cognitive bias that we think that we are smarter than others. We, including myself, right? So each person in the world has this moment where they think that they are smarter than others. Like, I cracked the code. I know better than everyone in this room, which is not true. Like, we all need to humble down and understand that there are situations that we just miss some things and we interpret it wrong. The third thing is, I actually come from a very privileged background where I grew up. As I mentioned, I grew up in Egypt, and I grew up in a family that's middle to high class. I would say they gave me a good education and stuff. My parents are Muslims, which is in Egypt a privilege, right? It's not in Europe, but in Egypt they are the majority. They are the ones with the more power structure compared to the others. Sadly, I have a lighter shade of black, which is in Africa is still a privilege until today in 2020. I'm a cisgender, straight male. So honestly, I just had like all the boxes checked for me for the first like 23, 24 years of my life. And I remember when I was there, I remember people would confront me. I don't know, a Christian friend would tell me about a story, or a gay friend would tell me a story, a woman friend will complain about something. I was never the kind of people that would say, I don't believe you, or like I would say I'm against you, but I felt sympathy, like real sympathy, which I believe many people do. But I always had this question deep inside myself. Why is that person so sensitive? I don't see it. Like, why don't you just live with it? Like, ignore, you know, and move on. I even had this question, like, why are they making that much big fuss about this topic all the time? Every time we sit together, it has to come up. perhaps I also fell for a lot of fallacies. I was repeating a lot of fallacious arguments like this is reverse racist and stuff, which we will get also through this presentation and try to debunk these arguments. But then I moved to Europe, and there was this moment where I started to see a sudden change between one day and the other, because it's the next day that people are looking down to you every day. And it took years, actually, to get to this realization. This sentence here, you need to do 10 times more effort to achieve the same result, was told to me by my German manager at some point. He said, you are brown, you need to do 10 times more effort to achieve the same result. I was seeing things that today I call racist behaviors every day, right? In the first 2 years, 3 years, I wouldn't. In the first 2 years, 3 years, I was asking, am I becoming oversensitive like the people I was thinking they were oversensitive before? I was thinking maybe I am doing something wrong. Maybe I am not fitting with the people well. And then I was like, okay, this is not a new topic. There is academia, there is decades of research about this topic. It's not something we invented in 2017. And maybe I should do research, maybe I should read. And I started to realize that my whole life I was missing context. My whole life I was just thinking about it as a mathematical problem, which is not. So I decided to try to target individuals who unintentionally, and I really insist on this, unintentionally damage people, right? Damage your peers. Because if you intentionally damage someone, I don't think you should be welcomed in this room, not even in this conference. Also, people who unintentionally, because of this bias, think that they know more than the others, right? Including myself. We need to keep reminding ourselves that we are not as smart as we are. And I would like to try to add as much context as I can within the next 40 hours to this topic. 40 minutes, not 40 hours. Yeah. So this talk goes through 3 sections. The first section, I try to speak in a very theoretical, ethical way on explaining more the topic. And the second section goes more pragmatically on the impact of it on our industry, on the software we produce, and then some conclusion. So a common mistake that someone would do in this situation is to bring a thesaurus or a Wikipedia definition and put it. Don't, because in social sciences, thesaurus definitions doesn't make any sense. So you should never rely on the definition of racism in the dictionary. That's not true. There are much deeper things into that topic. But I still try to come up with an idea, like how I explain to someone who doesn't understand the term privilege this. So I was like, okay, let's make this game. Let's calculate together our privilege score. Each one of you in your brain calculate your privilege score, more or less. So add 1 to your privilege score. If, for example, you can go to social media, you can go to Facebook, to Twitter right now and post whatever you have in mind and not end up being jailed or in prison or murdered. This week, just this Friday, this is Patrick George, he's one of my closest friends, was arrested in Egypt after arriving back from Italy because of some tweets and Facebook posts. Just this week, right, while we are speaking at this. As 60,000 other Egyptians are now in political prisons. And I'm sure this is not an Egypt-only situation. Almost in many places around the world, people are imprisoned, people are killed just for the idea of writing a tweet or expressing themselves. This is a privilege that you can just say whatever you want without being blamed for it or murdered for it. Sorry, I skipped this line. Yeah. Also, add 1 to your score. For example, if you can go to someone and say the word I love you without getting scared about it. Because I'm straight male, I can do that. I can go to any woman I love, and I can say that. But not so far away, not, I don't know, in Eastern Europe, in places it happens that people are getting murdered for just saying the word I love you to someone. Because they believe that loving a man to a man is a thing that's worth killing. Very relevant to our industry, especially in the industry side, there is a lot of people that speak all the time about, why don't you work remotely and work from wherever you want and digital nomading and all these kind of things, assuming that the whole world is like an open place that I can enter whenever I want. While the truth is, we need a visa probably to go to the bathroom if you're not from Europe, right? Like, it's really hard for anyone outside this white privilege bubble to actually go and live wherever they want. It's not as easy as you're imagining. Maybe a last example is, if you have Muhammad as your second name, as I do, you're probably usually stopped in the random selection of the airport at any moment. Because it's very random. I can keep going on with this list forever, but I'm trying to show you that privilege is this kind of thing that is not set in stone. As I said, I was from a Muslim family which was a privilege in the past, and now it's not. Also, it's very coupled to its context. Also, it's very intersectional. So you cannot treat, like, again, I apologize for using this +1 in the example before because it's not that equal, right? A black woman is way more oppressed than a white woman, and both of them are way more oppressed than a white man, and so on. And it's very important also to note that you cannot say, I am only defending women with ignoring the other section. All of them intersect. You need to have a clear stance on all of the privileges. And it is very hard to realize. When you are a privileged person, you do not see your privilege. Trust me with that. Even if you think you see, you do not. You need to put a lot of effort to see your privilege. Finally, and this is the whole premise of this talk, when I call you privileged, I'm not cursing you. That doesn't mean you are an evil person. When I call you privileged, I'm trying to ask you that you need to realize this privilege and have some extra duties on the top. And here always comes the question, I did nothing wrong. Why am I expected to do more efforts than you, right? Let's take you back to the world of software engineering. Probably all of us at some point of life deal with what's called a legacy code base, a code base that has so many problems, it's old. It happened because you inherited a project from some developers in the past, and you know for sure that these developers had the best intentions, right? They tried to do their best to make this project well. But I don't know, one day, someone came to them from the business side and said, we need to ship this thing super fast, so they hacked something quickly. They introduced technical debt. One day, they had a wrong assumption of the future. They said, like, okay, in the future, we are heading in that direction, and then they built the software in that direction, and then they realized they need to change. Or, I don't know, they went to a Lambda Days conference, someone was speaking about something fancy, and they said, we will try this thing in our project and introduce something unmaintainable. This is what we all in this room, everyone in this industry, refers to as technical debt, and they call it a debt without any problem, right? And you need to remember that when you deal with technical debt, you cannot say, that didn't happen, I'm going to ignore the past. I'm going to just live as if no one did anything in the past. You cannot do that. You also cannot say, I will stop producing, I will rewrite everything from scratch, because that doesn't make any sense. When dealing with technical debt, you have to keep shipping, you have to keep moving forward, but you have to keep mindful of what happened in the past. You have to keep remembering what's happening in the past, and you have to try to fix it on the way. Well, we have a 200,000 years old project, and billions of developers worked on that project in the past. And unlike your software project, not all of them had the best intentions. I mean, you know, we had some really bad developers in this project. Everything in this project is really highly coupled, right? Like you touch something here, it breaks something at the end of the world. And it's very complex to understand. Each and every person writes their own documentation of this, and there are no tests. And you know, you can break anything without realizing. So yeah, this project is there. It's called humanity, and we are all collectively maintaining it. So please try to remember that we have things that happened in the past, and we need to keep moving forward, but we need to stay mindful of what happened and try to fix it. One last thing about the definition is some tendencies in our industry. We tend to decontextualize things. We want to remove context from everything. And I understand it. It makes sense on the code base, right? It makes sense to have everything single responsibility, no side effects, because we're in a functional programming conference. We don't want to have anything coupling with each other, even though that doesn't happen in reality in software, but we want that. We are trying to aspire to get to that state. Perhaps if I put anything before the word agnostic, software people becomes like, this is so cool. This is platform agnostic service, yay. So this is important to note that this does not apply on other things. Especially when it comes to social sciences, context is the most important thing to understand what's happening. You cannot just say 1 + 1 = 2 in social sciences. Okay. Now I will go to the part where I try to speak about some of these fallacies to make you understand what I'm talking about. Important to say that sometimes these fallacies would come out from an underprivileged person, a black person, a woman. Someone can repeat these fallacies from the underprivileged groups, but that doesn't mean anything, right? That can be a talk. I can give another talk on why does this happen in psychology, but this is not an excuse. First one is what I refer to as the intention versus the impact. So every single time I have seen, and this is like the most common one, anyone would complain about anything, the first answer has to always be, he did not mean it. He did not mean it, he was just joking. He did not mean it, he was doing that. The fact is, intention is not really a relevant factor when it comes to damaging people. Maybe to explain it better, you are in a park, and I throw a frisbee, and I hit your face and give you concussion. I did not mean it, but I still need to apologize. I still need to take you to a hospital, right? So it doesn't matter if you didn't mean it. You still need to apologize and make sure to help the person recover from the damage. The funny bit here is that on the other hand, when you are doing something good, you really need to understand why are you doing it. You need to have the intentions there. A good example to explain this is very common in our industry, pink washing, right? You have corporates who are super anti-gay, but they still go to gay parades in some city and say, yeah, X, I don't want to say it not to get sued, X company supports the gay rights because they wanted to do it for promotion or they want to do it for marketing. If you do a good thing, please make sure you understand exactly why are you doing this good thing. So the second thing comes from the US. A couple of years ago, there was this campaign in the US that was a response to American police brutality against the black folks. It was called the Black Lives Matter campaign. A very famous response from the right wing to this campaign was, but all lives matter. Because they were trying to suggest that people who were supporting this campaign were saying that black lives are more important than all other lives. In fact, it was just simply trying to point out a statistical fact that black people are more likely to be ended by the police in the US. That is a statistical fact. That doesn't have opinions in it. They were trying to push the country to recognize some inequity and perhaps bring an end to it. Maybe the best way to express this would have been Black Lives Matter too, but it wouldn't have fit the hashtag. So yes, all lives matter, but at the moment, only one subset currently is undervalued. Maybe this comic explains it. Right. Why am I saying this? I mean, this obviously is a very American thing, and I don't understand why is that related to the industry. But this applies in so many contexts, because every single time you would complain about, a woman would go and complain about a sexual harassment case from her manager, you will find some man saying, we all hate that guy because we suffer from the same oppression. You don't. You don't know nothing about what these people are going through. So please stop trying to put yourself in the same bucket, because you are actually demeaning, devaluing the amount of oppression these people are doing. Speak about their problems, don't try to put your ego into it. It's not about you anymore. Microaggressions, I will probably leave you with this video about it.
Who still don't think that microaggressions are a problem?
Oh, you're so well-spoken.
Just imagine, instead of being a stupid comment, a microaggression is a mosquito bite.
Ugh, it's a compliment.
Mosquito bites and their itch are one of nature's most annoying features. But if you're only bitten every once in a while...
No, where are you really from?
Cleveland?
Sure, it's annoying, but it's not that big a deal. The problem is that some people get bitten by mosquitoes a lot more than other people. I mean, a lot more. Whether it's on a date...
Oh, your English is so good.
Excuse me?
Going grocery shopping.
You know, everything happens for a reason.
I'm just buying apples.
Commuting to work.
So when are you gonna have a baby?
Watching TV.
We have to keep the Redskins' name. It's part of our culture and history.
Or just walking down the street with your partner.
I couldn't even tell you were gay.
Mosquitoes seem to pop up everywhere.
Do you know John? Give me shopping advice. I love Cher too.
And getting bit by mosquitoes every goddamn day.
Can I touch your hair?
Multiple times a day.
So pretty.
Can I touch it,
hair?
please? Can I please?
Is fucking annoying. And makes you want to go ballistic on those mosquitoes. Which seems like a huge overreaction to people who only get bit every once in a while.
It's just a mosquito bite. Who cares?
Just another angry black woman.
Of course, beyond just being annoying, some mosquitoes carry truly threatening diseases that can mess up your life for years.
Astrophysics? Maybe you should try less challenging, Major.
Ow, my dreams.
And other mosquitoes carry strains that can even kill you.
He looked like he was up to trouble, okay? I felt threatened.
So next time you think someone's overreacting, just remember, some people experience mosquito bites all the time.
just remember that some people experience mosquito bites all the time. That's the reason they're overreacting. Is the mic still on? Yeah. The mother of all fallacies, the reverse oppression argument, probably the most common, especially in our industry. Okay, as I started, the definition of racism, sexism, whatever, on the dictionary doesn't apply, right? But I would like to show maybe with a more clear example. This person here on the Twitter is saying that he believes that being straight, heterosexual male on Twitter in 2018 is harder than it was being openly homosexual in the US in the 1960s. Of course, that person thinks that he's so oppressed because he cannot say a joke and offend 1 million people because, oh my God, I cannot express my amazing joke, which is so not funny. This is a clear example of not realizing his privilege, right? Not removing this context of his privilege. Because, in fact, I have never, ever, ever heard, and please correct me if anyone ever saw this, heard of a straight male being killed for the fact of being straight. I've never heard that, or being in jail because of being straight, right? But this still happens today, not in the 1960s. So I'm sorry you cannot say your joke and get more people in jail. It maybe reminds me of this joke about the British kid crying to his dad and saying, "Dad, why are we so oppressed? Why does the rest of the world has Independence Day and we don't?" There is a reason for that. So yes, remember, it's not oppression unless there is an attached historical baggage to it. Remember that it has to have a power imbalance attached to it. There has to be this power difference between the two sides. To sum it up, we are not trying to seek equality for everyone at the moment. We are trying to seek equity and maybe eventually liberation. Right? I want to give boxes to the people who are missing boxes. And eventually, we should be able to kick this wall together, but we are still not there yet. There is a lot of other fallacies, but we don't have time to talk about. But for mentioning, especially in the post-Soviet Union countries, it's a very common, this whataboutism or whataboutery. So you speak about an issue, and the response becomes, well, but what about cancer patients? I don't know why talking about racism is demeaning other causes, right? It's the opposite. They are trying to put you into this point where you are comparing two people in problem rather than talking about the actual oppressor. We have a real oppressor there. Stop trying to say like, but women's rights are more important than black people's rights. That's not true. Both of them are equally important. It's the oppressor that needs to pay for it. Also, if you find yourself at any moment starting a sentence saying, my black friend once told me that he accepts this kind of joke, so I don't know why the others don't, or my woman friend said that she doesn't believe that's sexual harassment, like you are not the speaker of your black friends, like they can speak for themselves, that's one. Second, please just don't use this narrative ever. Even if there is one of your friends that is fine with something, that doesn't mean the rest of us is. You can find books on this topic, but just remember that in social sciences, in topics of social, economical, political things, you cannot treat it like criminal stuff. It's not your word against his word. It doesn't work like that. There is systematic oppression that exists in this world, and you need to understand that justice as you think of doesn't apply the same way. But that's it about this ethical part. Why are we speaking about this in technical things, right? Is there a pragmatic aspect of this? Of course there is. In the next section, I will try to give you some small examples of things that happens in our industry. The first one is the so not famous, but I like to call it the famous last name issue. I'm a web developer, right? And we usually have, any web application in the world will have users, I hope. So how do you model users in any web application? We have this common thing where we have like first name, last name, password, username, or email, or whatever identifier you will use. There is an implicit assumption here that every person that will use your application has this first name and last name. There is a very clear implicit assumption there. This is a very good example of what's called the false consensus effect, where we as people believe that everyone else is the same as us. Have the same thoughts, the same habits, we are all the same. Which is not true, because I can give you a surprise, I don't have a last name. Like, in my country, this concept doesn't exist at all. We only have first names. And so there are 100 million Egyptians that might use your applications that don't have last names. I don't even see a benefit of having the last name, but okay. And I'm sure there are other nations in this world that also don't have last names. It's not only us. This issue might seem to you very trivial. I don't get it. Why does this issue is that important? Because it makes your software not complete, actually, sometimes. It makes your software do a lot of problems. I myself had 2 countries in Europe. One of them gave me a last name different than the other one, so my bank application will not accept me because they need to verify me based on my last name. Why all of that? Why don't you just store people as name? What is the benefit you are even gaining from this split? No one knows. We just found our grandparents doing that, and we stuck to it. This amazing GitHub repo is called the Awesome Falsehoods. It lists hundreds of those examples. Things that every time I open this repo, I find, oh, I just implemented that yesterday myself. Oh, I did that mistake myself. So make sure to check it out. It's amazing. The racist, between quotes, camera phenomenon. There are so many videos on the internet that shows how cameras react differently with different races. For example, this horrible photo, the Nikon thinks that any Asian person have their eyes blinked. Or this video here.
This is using the video tracking software.
All right.
Explain.
My coworker Wanda and I are sitting in front of an HP Media Smart computer. State-of-the-art computer, wouldn't you say?
I'd say.
We're using the face tracking software, so it's supposed to follow me as I move. I'm black. I think my blackness is interfering with the computer's ability to follow me. As you can see, I do this, no following. Not really following me. I back up, I get really, really close to try to let the camera recognize me, not happening. Now, my white coworker, Wanda, is about to slide into frame. You will immediately see what I'm talking about. Wanda, if you would, please.
Sure.
Now, as you can see, the camera is panning to show Wanda's face. It's following.
You can find the rest of the video on the internet. It's fun. And there is a lot of these videos, really. There are plenty of those. But how? I mean, I don't believe that technology can be racist. Like, it doesn't work like that. This story has a background, Shirleys cards. This lady here, this fine lady, was named Shirley. She was the model of Kodak in the 1960s or 50s, I think, when they were developing the whole camera film industry. And they issued this reference card based on only white models. But there is a difference in this specific industry. It didn't happen unintentionally. There are proofs of meetings of people discussing, by the way, this reference card ignores black people. And then they said, but black people can't afford to buy a camera. Why bother and make the film more expensive, right? Of course, we are today in the modern days of digital camera. We don't use this chemistry anymore, but this assumption in the past kept going on and on that it even broke what we live today, right? And there are a lot of efforts happening on this side. So just to be clear, there are a lot of efforts to change that, but this happened. Finally, what I refer to as the mysterious case of sexist airbags. I don't know who knows this information here. The first few years when airbags were released, more women and children were dying compared to men when airbags open. It happened again because of the same bias. There are all male engineers. When they wanted to get test dummies, they took the average weight and height amongst them and made the test dummies and kept testing on it. Of course, this is fixed now for women. I don't know for children, they say there is still statistical difference, but for women, for sure, this is fixed now. So what I was trying to say is that this idea of inclusion needs to be considered on every stage, starting from hiring, right? Because unless you have a diverse team, you cannot even see it because of this false consensus bias. Then with thinking about the requirements, you need to think about your people when designing stuff, when implementing stuff, when testing stuff. Otherwise, your software is not complete. Your software is not doing its job. Okay, you heard all of this. Maybe you liked, maybe you didn't like. But what to do now? As an employee in our industry, or maybe in the academia, try to always remember one thing. Our software engineering industry is a privilege on its own. Why is it a privilege? Because We work in a candidate-driven market, let's face it, right? Like companies try to reach out to us, unlike the rest of the world where people are trying to find a job. So please recognize this. Please be very humble when you speak about things. Please try to listen to people when they talk to you about things. Please remember the thing that I repeated the whole talk. You are not as smart as you think you are. You are not. Please do your homework. Stop just listening from someone something and just repeating it without even trying to read one article properly on the internet. Try to speak up, not just for underprivileged people in terms of race or gender or sexual orientation, for people in your company who work in the warehouse, right? For people in your company that works in the cleaning stuff. Speak up for those people when you see they are being used. Stand up and say, I don't accept that. If you don't like it, I'm quitting. Because what can happen? You will lose your job. You will find another job in our industry. Second thing, if you run a company, if you happen to run a company, please recognize this issue. This issue is not trivial. This issue exists, especially in Europe. If you have, there are those people who are called diversity professionals. I'm not one of them. But please find someone and hire them. And please stop trying to use these issues to market yourself. Please stop. This is like so offensive. People are not diversity hires for you. People are not waiting for your banner in the gay parade. No one wants that. And try to listen to your underprivileged employees when they complain about someone, the manager, whatever. When they complain, try to listen. Make sure to have an open and a transparent communication framework in your companies for such issues all the time. Finally, most importantly, stop shutting down the conversation. Please, 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 stop being scared of having a conversation. Stop shutting down people when they speak up. When someone says something, make sure that everyone listens to that thing. Make sure to gather your company and make a meeting and discuss that thing. Stop trying to hide it under the rug, because that takes us nowhere. As tech community members in general, we need to remember to support all diversity-related initiatives, right? Things like Women Who Code, Django Girls, Rails Girls, Code Curious, Hispanic people in the US campaigns, refugee tech stuff. There are so many of these campaigns, and I think that all of us can do something to help these things. And maybe more important to realize that when you go and help in these things, you are not doing it because you are a nice person. It's not about you at all. You are doing it because you have a debt that you need to pay. You are doing this because it's an obligation on your side to go and help people to do these things. If you understand enough, write blog posts, come to conferences, meetups, and speak to people. And if you are an ally, try to really learn what does it mean to be an ally, because allyship doesn't mean you are the victim. You are just an ally of a victim. This fight is not about you. This fight is about the actual victim. Try to remember this. Try to read. There is a lot of research on allyship and how to do it properly. So finally, the question that everyone asks is, why don't we just all be nice to each other and just move on? Right? Like, why don't the world become nice and we love the world and move on? I just hope that you understand that your ability to be sick of politics is a privilege in action. It's your privileges that allows you to live this politics-free life, nothing else. You are less likely to be a target of bigotry. You are less likely to be physically attacked in the street or deported because of your race, right? This is something I live on a daily basis. I know that you are tired of the hustle, but for us, our safety is on stake, right? So that's why we are forced into this. The second thing, that you imagining that people do this because they like to play the victim card. No one likes to play the victim card. Whatever they gain out of this, just no one plays that. You need to realize that it's really hard and exhausting to bring up this topic. Giving this talk for me, was one of the hardest things ever. My ability to just come out to the community one day and say, I feel oppressed, I just need to face you and tell you this, is much harder than what you imagine. And I know that it's tiring and annoying for you, but believe me, it's much more tiring and annoying for us to talk about it. But you just need to remember that this is not a fight for you not to tweet stuff, it's a fight for us on our life and safety. And if you really don't see that, that simply is because of your privilege. Thank you.
We have plenty of time for questions.
He's up there.
Okay. Please, like, raise your hands high so that I can see them. It's quite difficult.
Hi there. Thank you. That was an amazing presentation. I don't really have a question. I have an example. What you say about the last name. People from Spanish and Portuguese-speaking countries usually have very long names, and my case, I have 2 names, 2 last names. How often I have been to an application that doesn't let me put a space in the last name field? It happens. And even here in Poland, to get a phone card, you have to register yourself with the ID. And my ID in Spanish is written 2 last names, 2 names. They wrote my name as my first last name and my last name as my second last name. So my registration in Play is absolutely wrong, and I complained, but they didn't care, and it was like, whatever. That's everyday life.
I mean, if you want even a much stronger example I learned about lately was that in the American elections last time, one of the companies built some electronic solution that ignored special characters in names. They ignored that people can have an O with an umlaut in their names. So any American with a background that has this issue in their name couldn't vote. That even changed, I mean, we have Trump now. Like, so, yeah. Down there, Joseph.
Okay, thanks.
So I live in France, in Europe, and I'm white and visibly heterosexual, although that's not the case. But by European standards, I'm very conservative. But by American standards, where my family is, I'm extremely liberal. They think I'm a socialist atheist. My easiest reaction is to block all of them from social media and never talk to them. Is that a good solution? If I talk to them, it just causes arguments and more hatred. I don't know if there's a solution to that problem.
I honestly have the same problem myself, usually with, especially with people that you're so close to, right? I believe that there is an emotional part there. If it's my family, I don't want to lose them over this topic, right? Or if it's your family. But I think we need to have this conversation, regardless of how uncomfortable is it. Maybe do the effort of doing so much introduction, of telling them like, I know it's hard, because I know how hard is it to change. All of us as humans, it's very hard to change our mentality, but try to put this introduction so long of like, just try to give it a chance, just try to listen to me, maybe show more personal examples of people they know, because I am sure they eventually at some point of life met someone, show them an example, get someone that they know and emotionally relate to tell them a story. That probably helps, I think. I hope at least.
Aren't we sometimes running into the risk of overcorrection? Like, for example, hiring quotas, which basically sacrifice...
Can you repeat the last sentence?
Aren't we running into the risk of overcorrection on this topic? Like, for example, hiring quotas, when you're basically sacrificing potential skill for some kind of other metric?
That's a very good question, actually. The idea of overcorrection is, in my opinion, a valid idea by definition, but the truth is, or the reality shows, that diversity quotas were the only thing that work. We are in an industry now that nothing else worked. But look at the United Nations efforts with using diversity quotas, and it was actually the only thing that effectively worked in some industries. So I know that it sounds for you like this, but we are data-driven people. We are academics and scientists and supposedly engineers. We only deal with data. We don't deal with other things. Maybe another thing that relates to this overcorrection that probably people bring up is things like the call-out culture, like people exposing someone when they do a mistake. Give them an alternative. Give us an alternative. Give people an alternative to do that in a better way, but that doesn't exist. If you tell me, if you have a suggestion on how to do it correctly without doing the diversity quota, please suggest, but I don't see.
No, I don't have a suggestion, but I'm thinking, does hiring quotas really work, like you're saying, or it works only in high-profile cases? So the fact that Google can balance things out and have meet their hiring quotas doesn't change the proportion of people in in demand, so that Google can achieve this goal, but some small company cannot possibly achieve this goal because Google did it.
I don't want to speak about specific companies intentionally, but this, for me,
was just an example.
What happens in our industry at the moment is a lot of people saying they have diversity quotas, but they don't understand why they are doing this, and that leads to a much worse situation, which was the one thing I was talking about. I don't want to hire people because they are diversity hires. That's not the case. Actually, 99% of the times, the women I worked with, or the people who are not privileged that I worked with, were much more efficient and better quality of people, given that they also contribute to the thing. But usually what these companies do, regardless of Google or whatever, when they say we have a diversity quota, they do it because they want to promote themselves as something. They don't do it because they understand the scientific background of it. If you want a good example of industries that this worked for, I will try to look for it, but there is a UN paper that was speaking about cases in the foreign affairs sector of doing diversity quotas in the past, and it worked. So there are proofs already of industries that managed to use diversity quotas to transform from a male-dominated industry to other situation. That's what I can say. Yes.
Yeah, before my question, I would just like to share regarding the name thing as well. So in the Philippines, we don't only have a last name, but we also have a middle name, which is the mother's maiden last name. So I've experienced that in my passport, it says my last name as like Fastine. But in Sweden, where I work, all my work documents show my last name as both my middle name and last name. So I always get questioned in like airports, like, okay, is this really you? Why are the documents different? But anywho, for my question, I'm wondering, in a company setting, what is the better feedback mechanism? For example, someone wants to report some issue that they have experienced. Is it anonymously, or like, is it good to have someone, like identified person to talk to? Yeah, so.
I would be a liar if I can give you the silver bullet, because as I said, I'm not an expert in this, right? But from my experience, I have seen companies that did this anonymous thing. Sometimes it worked, sometimes not. I have seen companies that did it also overly not anonymous and exposing everyone. Also, sometimes it works, sometimes it's not. I don't have the clear answer, honestly, with you. I haven't seen it working properly anywhere so far. I haven't seen a place where reporting code of conducts was working well so far. Especially that the people that say that they are maintaining the code of conducts are usually, I don't know, the head of HR, who is also a white male, that sometimes he is racist himself, and I don't know what to tell him.
Yeah, I totally understand, because in our company, we also use this software called Winning Temp. So there are several questions and some questions can like trigger let's say an issue that the management can shed a light on. But since it's anonymous, it's difficult to like pinpoint, okay, what exactly it is, who should we talk to, so.
Yeah, I don't have a silver bullet, I'm sorry.
No, thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Okay, how about one more question?
Hi, thanks for the talk. So I wanted to share a sort of anecdote example of diversity quotas going wrong, sort of. So in Soviet Union, at some point, there was a policy, unspoken policy, that the government, they thought that there was an overrepresentation of Jews in academia. So at some point, in some faculties, people which had Jew in their passport written, they were denied access to higher education. So it was kind of true that Jews were kind of overrepresented, but at the same time, those quotas, diversity quotas, sort of, they were used as a tool of oppression.
Absolutely. Everything we talk here has to have privilege and power balance and history baggage inside, right? So anything, when we speak about diversity quota, if you do diversity quota to get more men in HR, I'm not interested in that, right? You are interested into empowering the people who already has their privileges less. I don't want you to do a diversity quota to get more men into HR. This is not, I think, my understanding of what diversity quota should be, at least my personal understanding.
Thank you.
let's give Amr a closing round of applause, and please
Thank you so much.
see him in person if you want to talk more.